All right, it's finally here. Now this video is going to make a few people upset, but if you become upset in this video, you're upset because I said it, not because there's anything wrong with it. If anybody else said it, it would have been okay. So today we're going to be talking about what the heck are Western manga artists supposed to call themselves per se, because what you see on the screen here, we have manga, manhwa, and manhua, right? And everybody should know what manga is. That's the Japanese, that's the Japanese comic, I suppose. And manhwa is the Korean version, and manhua is the Chinese version. So what exactly is the Western version? Because in France, they have their own called Manfra. Now, if we actually type Manfra over here, you're going to see that it is a real thing. Now, Manfra sounds ridiculous, but there's nobody who's going to be like, yo, that totally sounds retarded. It's so weird and stupid. No, I don't know who made up that term Manfra, but we know what it means. We know what it means. It's manga produced in Japan. Now, I suppose people should know the actual definition of manga. Well, if you do your own research, you'll understand that the man part means whimsical, and then the ga means pictures, whimsical pictures. So if we go to manfra, I suppose it's whimsical pictures produced in Japan. If we go to manhwa, whimsical pictures produced in Korea. Go to China, whimsical pictures produced in China. It's pretty straightforward, right? So that means the Western manga artist needs a new term for himself, because Western manga artist is too broad. Indie manga artist is too broad. We need a new term. And here at Coffee Comics, we have made this new term. And I'm going to say it right now. And I don't care if you get triggered, it will be known that from this day on, all those who create manga in the Americanized West, what we produce is called ManAa. Yeah, sounds crazy, but so does Manfra, right? You're not going to scream about Manfra, but you're going to scream about ManAa. ManAa is a term that I made up. It derives from manga, which, as I said, man means whimsical, ga means pictures. And so, whimsical pictures from Japan, that's manga. ManAa is whimsical pictures produced in the Americanized West. That is what I am going to classify myself as right now, and what you should classify yourself as. But there are standards in ManAa, as there are standards in Manfra, because Manfra follows the standard of the Japanese production of manga, right? As it says here, most manhwa such as Radiant, Dreamland, yada yada yada, have a format similar to that of manga, but can be read left to right, such as Wakfu, or right to left, such as Radiant. Most, if not all, the works that are generally designed as manhwa have an art style inspired by manga. Some manhwa, such as La Rose, whatever, have an art style inspired from manga, while still being read left to right and having a hardcover, Bandai, whatever format. Their stories sometimes reference those manga as well. See, Manfra follows the Japanese standard, the Japanese format. Now, we're going to simplify it even further. When I say standard, I mean format. Manfra follows the Japanese format of production. The paneling, the character designs, and the size of the paper. It uses the Japanese format, the Japanese standard. And so from now on this day, all those who want to classify themselves as Manhaka, which is a ManAa artist, basically. A Manhaka is an individual who produces ManAa in the Americanized West. All those who want to classify themselves as this, right? Your duty is to uphold the format of the Japanese standard, as the French do. Now, this is coming about because I see it very clearly. The Japanese don't need us. They don't care about us. We need them. We're trying to knock at their door to get an anime like white manga been doing for 400 years. And they're not going to open that door. They could, but it's like, bro, well, your story don't make no sense. So it's time we move on. It's time we do what the other countries have been doing. The French wanted to create manga for French people. And so they did. They followed the Japanese standard, and their first target market were the French consumers. The Koreans did the exact same thing, right? They all borrowed from manga, but put a twist on it. We're gonna look at Manhwa and Manhua a little bit to see the different characteristics. However, I am making it known now that from this day onwards, right, everybody who produces manga in the West, in the Americanized West, you ought to classify yourself as a ManAa artist, right? So let's go to this. In fact, before I go there, see, this is a French manga. It's a French Manfra, and it has the exact same dimensions as a normal manga, actually. And the artist is Jero CJ, whatever. And I wouldn't know this guy is French. It looks like it was made in Japan. But that's okay. That's totally okay. That's totally cool because they know what format and what standard they abide by. And so all those who want to be part of the ManAa society, basically, you're gonna have to follow the Japanese standard also, right? Because at the end of the day, knocking at the Japanese door forever it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. There is no direction thus far because everybody been saying, what was it called? OEL, original English language manga. What the hell is that? That's too crazy. That's too crazy. So, and it just has no direction because there was no standard to abide by. But ManAa, there is a standard. We now have to focus on where we are from. And we have to focus on whom we can reach. And my audience, of course, 95% of them are Americans. I'm not American. I don't live in America, but most of my consumers are American. So I'm an Americanized person, Westernized person living in Africa. And so that's why I say, well, I suppose it's time to move on and create ManAa. So let's look at this article. This is a very nice article that breaks things down nicely for us. All of you should know what manga is, so we don't have to go into details with it. However, this guy who wrote the article does mention a few characteristics about the styles manga, manhwa, and manhua. So let's just look at these here real quick. It says, in terms of manga's art styles, most mangas are usually in black and white. There aren't that many fully colored manga out there. Colored panels are usually only used for special editions to emphasize certain panels. However, just because manga is black and white doesn't mean that it looks dull. Excellent artists can bring out a level of detail that looks equally, if not even more impressive than colored panels. Just look at some of the examples below. So a key distinction of manga is it definitely being in black and white. So what would be the key distinction between manga and manhwa? Because we see with Manfra, it is also mostly black and white, and only certain pages are in color for emphasis or introductory pages, right? So it follows the complete Japanese standard. And as I say, ManAa will do the exact same thing. But it's good to understand the key fundamental characteristics of each whimsical imagery, basically. So that's Vagabond, One Punch Man. I don't know this manga. I don't know that one. But you guys get the idea. Berserk, of course. What manga truly excels at is its sheer variety. There's literally a manga for everyone, be it comedy, romance, gore, action, yada, yada, yada. The length is various too, with some mangas ending within 100 episodes while others ongoing. As opposed to manhwa and manhua, manga is best enjoyed in its original printed form. Manga is also read right to left rather than left to right. You can still read it digitally on your phone, but the text and images can look quite cramped. And that's another major fundamental difference with manga in particular. The best way to enjoy manga is in printed form. The best way to enjoy Manfra is in printed form. The best way to enjoy Manhwa is not necessarily in printed form. That's why they made webtoons. It's actually digital. So in our case, here's the catch. I should make a separate video about ManAa, really, in terms of how exactly is this going to work. But I'll just mention it here briefly, that because there is no definitive establishment in the West that this is a ManAa publisher, don't tell me about Saturday AM. That's a piece of trash company, woke garbage nonsense. They don't care about the craft. They don't care about the stories. A bunch of liars and manipulators, and Frederick is a monster. However, what we have to definitely understand is, how are we going to dish this thing out? What is the best format people are going to enjoy ManAa in? Clearly, we don't have an established company in which can do the printing and stuff for us. So obviously, ManAa is going to first start off digitally. It's going to have to be dished out digitally to the masses, and consistently, right? And consistently, because that's the major make or break really in pretty much any business. So if we move to Manhwa, it says, while not as popular as manga, Manhwa is increasing in popularity. There are more and more shows being adapted from Manhwa, which helps give it popularity boost. The translation for Manhwa is generally quite decent due to its more simplistic language style as to opposed to Japanese manga. There are not that many nuances in terms of the language as well. While not as numerous as Japanese translators, there are more and more official and non-official. Okay, that didn't really matter. As opposed to manga's black and white art style, modern manhwa is predominantly fully colored. While manga art might seem more epic, Manhwa doesn't lag behind as well. Manhwa also emphasizes more on the fluidity of actions and its dynamics, which might occasionally make it hard to follow. That's very much so true. But I've noticed as well with Manhwa, it's got like heavy duty dynamic pages and enormous splash pages. And sometimes it's rather much for me personally. And I don't technically like it colored. I don't like this manga inspired style in color. I just don't. That's just me. But hey, that's what makes manhwa different to manga. And in ManAa, we will stick to the Japanese format, it being black and white for majority of the time. So yeah, there was also an article, not an article, but another distinction between manhwa and manga right here on Wikipedia, which says manhwa art differs from manga and manhua as well with its distinct features. The bodies of the characters are often realistically proportioned while the faces remain unrealistic. Manhwas also have very detailed clothing on their characters as well as interesting backgrounds. Webtoons uses vertical scrolling to their advantage to demonstrate movement or the passage of time. Manhwa webtoons are also recognized for having simplified dialogue compared to print. So now, of course, manga can also have very, very detailed clothing and realistic proportions, but that's what manhwa is definitively known for compared to manga, that majority of its work has realistic proportions. One popular one, really popular one, is this one called True Beauty. Notice the character here. He is very realistically illustrated, and is his face simplified? I suppose, right? So this is a review. I didn't read it, but the guy who wrote this review, or the woman who wrote this review, said, well, she doesn't know why this thing is so popular. If we go to Google Images and we look at some random manhwa that pops up, we can see that, yeah, what Wikipedia was saying in terms of the proportions, majority of it is the case. Here it is again. If we were to click here, these top 10, you would see that there are some that is very simplified, that has this shonen sort of look. But in the end, number one being Solo Leveling, it has realistic proportions, very much so. And I've never read this one before. Tower of God, I don't really remember, but you get the idea. You get the idea. You can see the realistic proportions here and so on. So that's what makes manhwa different from manga. If we look at Manhua now, which is the Chinese one, well, let's finish this up. While manhwa's theme might not be as varied as manga, what it does really well is the way action scenes are drawn. There's great emphasis on how each attack executed, the motions involved, and the impact behind each strike. See, this is very technical. This is a very technical distinction from manga. Now, manga has all these things already, yes, but with manhwa, there is an obvious, very, very different execution to how they draw the action scenes and the splash pages. You can see some of these examples over here, and this example as well, right? So it takes a lot of reverse engineering on how you're going to set yourself apart if you're not producing manga. The Koreans who are like, well, I'm Korean, I'm stuck in Korea, I don't want to go to Japan. I have to create, I like manga, but we have to make it different for ourselves. This is what they did. Manfra though, Manfra didn't really say any of that. They just said, we're going to follow the Japanese standard 100%, but our target market will firstly be the French, and that's it, and it works. That's it, and it works. But I will say that a lot of French manga, or I should say Manfra, indeed is heavily, like the popular ones, they are heavily inspired by shonen. Very, very shonen inspired. And that's okay. And they have a direction. It's all about having that direction, really. Without it, you're just going in circles, not knowing what you're doing, not hitting where you're supposed to hit. And so there are no return of investments because you don't know what you're doing. It's time we focus on what the heck we're doing. From this day onwards, we are producing ManAa over here. Now, when we come to Manhua, it says perhaps the lesser known of the trio in the Western Hemisphere, Manhua is generally more popular within China or other Chinese-speaking communities. It does not have much of an appeal elsewhere, unfortunately. Compared to manga or manhwa, the translation for Manhua is usually a hit or miss. Unlike manga and manhwa, almost all manhua has roots in novels. Manhua also uses more Chinese slang terms, proverbs, and terminology which might be harder to translate literally. Unfortunately, this means that the translated sentences end up being much more wordy than the original text. Now, the onomatopoeias of the Japanese language is very unique and distinct, and clearly so is it in the Chinese. Now, in English, I'm not an English teacher. It is, man, if we were to turn ManAa into like a proper science, I would need scholars and PhD professors coming in the lab with me and be like, yo, let's write a book on this. Let's write a curriculum on this, because if we're going to turn this into a real thing, into a real profession, that we know what we are. We're not actually just stealing from Japan or wannabes anymore. No, we know what we are. We are manakas. We are ManAa artists. We are producers of We are producers of manga that has been created in the Americanized West. That is going to solidify our foundation and make sure that our direction is on the straight and narrow. No longer will be just jumping here and there and trying to do this or that. You're going to know exactly what you're supposed to do because there's going to be a standard of it. Without standards, everybody just floats around and you throw stuff at the wall and you hope it sticks and it just doesn't. There needs to be a definitive. And I'm bringing this definitive, and I know many gonna hate, many gonna laugh. Go ahead and laugh. Show how dumb you are. Show how dumb you are, because this is what the Koreans did, this is what the Chinese did, this is what the French did. And now, because I am saying, hey, we should follow suit, let's make ManAa, you're gonna laugh. You're probably gonna make another hour video saying, this guy's crazy. He's saying, we gotta make ManAa. I'm not gonna do that. If I never made this up and somebody else did, you would have followed. You would have followed suit. If anyone accuses me of hate, sorry, bro, you're the one who hates. You're the one who hates, straight up. So let us continue here. Compared to manga or manhwa, the translation for manhua, we read that part. Manhua's art is also a mix between manga and manhwa. Manhua usually adheres to the panel-like structure of manga, but it also fully colored like manhwa. However, while the coloring and lines in manhwa are used to emphasize movements, the coloring in manhua is more water-like and the lines have more realistic feel. I've read a couple of Chinese manga. I actually liked it. It was, how can I say this? It was like reading a bunch of vagabond manga, really. It has a very strong sense of realism, but the paneling was very much so manga. The pacing was very much so manga as well. So this is what it takes. It takes a strong reverse engineering in order to create something new and fresh for your particular region. And all of us in the Americanized West, this is what we have to do. And this is the first of its kind here ever being announced. I don't know how many views this is gonna get, but at the end of the day, this is where it starts. Saturday AM failed because they don't have a direction. Shrine Comics flopping around. Slingshot don't know what the heck they doing, right? And so I think this is where it truly starts. For those who are gonna say, well, you making yourself the dictator of all of this, that's the main issue. The main issue is, it's not about me. It's not about me, it's about all of us. The problem is here, somebody wants to talk smack and say, no, Coffee is making himself the king. He's making himself the king here. That means all of us have to bow. Nigga, did I say I am the king? I am somebody who has reverse engineered this thing and say, guys, for the sake of all of us to have a solid direction, know what we're doing and know what we're producing and know who we're producing it for, it must be this way. It's just common sense. Whoever's going to resist this is an idiot. Is a hateful idiot that does not even produce manga and so does not understand anything I've said, but is just a hateful moron who has nothing else to do with their life. But for those who actually want solid direction and understands the importance of a direction and a foundation, right? You will approve of this. You will approve of this because this is how you have impact. By having a direction and having a standard, this is how you have an impact. Manfra has had an impact. Radiant, this manga called Ripper, has had an impact because it has direction, right? It falls under Manfra. It abides by the Japanese standards of production. Manhwa in itself, True Beauty, an example, has made an impact because it has a direction and it borrows from the manga standards but twists it because of how the product has to be sold, and it has made an impact. Manhua, however, it has not, because it's hard to translate. But I know some Chinese manga and they're pretty good. But because of the translations issue, yeah, ain't nobody got time for that. But it has made an impact of its own in its own region. So if we're going to have an impact in our region, the Americanized West, then this is what we have to do. We have to abide by, because you can, fine, whoever wants to say, screw you, bro, I'm not following or classifying myself as a ManAa artist. Okay, whatever, do whatever you want, see where that gets you. See where that gets you, because so far you ain't nowhere. You ain't nowhere and you're not going anywhere. If you want to go somewhere, you're going to listen to what Coffee's saying. You're going to listen to what needs to be done. What needs to be done is we need a direction, and I've brought it. We need standards, and I've brought it. And these standards are not my own. I didn't make up the standards. They are objective observations from the Japanese manga craft. So we take exactly that. The difference is now we focus on the target market within our region. And we do not call it manga anymore, because I've come very close to the manga art style. I'd say I'm at like 90%. Where you look at my stuff, it's 90% there to the Japanese thing, right? The Japanese art style per se. But I don't think it's ever going to reach 100%, ever. And that's the same for many of us, because many in the West have been inspired by other things. And that's fine, right? That's fine. That means there is now going to be some leeway for those who can't fully capture the Japanese aesthetic of the character designs. There's going to be some leeway, okay? And this is not a shortcut to say, yay, finally, I don't have to be a manga artist like that. I can be a ManAa and just create trash. No. Does this make me some sort of gatekeeper? I guess. But for the sake of quality, I kind of have to be. I kind of have to be, right? And common sense also serves as a gatekeeper, because if ManAa is like Manfra, well, Manfra borrows from Manga. So that's exactly what we're doing. However, we're just in the Americanized West. This is what we have to do. I'll make a separate video about ManAa in particular, but this was an introduction to that, looking at the differences between manga, manhwa, manhua, and now ManAa and Manfra. Right? Anyone who calls ManAa ridiculous, why aren't you calling Manfra ridiculous? Oh, that's right. It's because you just hate me. That's all there is to it. If you want to have impact as Manfra has had impact, the Radiance, the Rippers, or you want impact like Manhwa, like True Beauty and Solo Leveling, you gotta stay in your lane. And I'm giving you a lane now. I'm giving you a lane, right? And this is what's best for all of us. But the major thing that needs to be discussed in the next video is going to be, how are these ManAas going to be sold to people? Will it strictly be digital, like webtoons, or what? Because the printing and distribution thing, we don't have a network for that. We don't. We'd have to do everything ourselves, or you go through Image, but Image, Image is doing its own thing. Yeah. So we have to think about that, but I hope y'all start thinking about this, because this is important. We're running out of time, and I'm sick and tired of just going in circles, producing like manga, but then I don't live in Japan. No. What I am producing is ManAa. Here on out, ManAa. Until next time.